Hey friends, this is episode 5 of this series of turbocharging my Honda CRX. If you haven't seen the previous videos of all the supporting mods that you have to do before you get to put one of these in your Honda, then check the link in the description and watch the previous videos. Otherwise, let's get started.
In the last episode, we did some cutting, welding, fabricating, and wiring, all to make room in the engine bay for the big turbo and other parts. In this episode, we're going to install those parts and the turbo. Then we're going to weld up some intercooler piping, exhaust piping. We're going to run oil lines. We're going to run air lines, and we're going to tune it. And most importantly, we're going to hit a real racetrack in autocross and make a bunch of cool noises. Stay tuned. This is an oil-cooled turbo, so I will need oil lines, a return, and a input. This is the return line I'm making first. It's a -8 AN line, and I'm using these AN fittings as well. It is a steel braided, but it's not PTFE. It's just rubber inside because that's all I need for oil. This toy looking like wrench I'm using is an aluminum wrench specifically for AN fittings so that you don't mar it up. Now this came with the line kit. I'll put a link in the description. This little adapter that goes on the turbo, but when I put it on the turbo, the holes don't quite line up. So I am drilling it out right now with a cobalt bit to make a nice smooth hole and not warp anything. As you see, I already put in the AN fitting with the PTFE liquid. And now that I have that drilled out, I'm ready to drain the oil from the car, and take out the plug. This right here is a Moroso oil pan, so I have this bung ready to receive the return oil. I drained it here, but that was a mistake. It's actually, I should have just drained it from the bottom like a normal person instead of trying to do it here, because this ended up taking forever and I had to do it that way anyways. But we'll skip the drain process and go into where I'm going to thread this in. So I put liquid PTFE on here as well, and I'm threading that in, and that is a NPT fitting, not an AN, so it's AN to NPT, so that means that it is tapered. So I'm just going to snug that up and completely block the camera, and it should be just fine with the PTFE. Should have no leaks. With the fitting installed in the oil pan, I get back to the oil line. There's a lot of ways to cut this steel braided line. I'm using possibly the most over-the-top method, which is this bandsaw, but what I like about it is it does not twist or pinch or crimp the line. It makes a nice straight cut. It's pretty fast, and if you have a bandsaw laying around, why not use it? Then it's just a simple matter of twisting in this AN fitting. I have nylon clamps in my vise so that I can pinch it here without marring it up, and then I will pre-install the 2-bolt adapter that goes onto the turbo. I could put that on the turbo ahead of time, but I think it'll be easier to install this way, so I'm just going to snug it up now. So now I'm going to install this oil line. The 2-bolt adapter is going to go to the bottom of the turbo. The other end goes into the oil pan. The length of this was carefully measured to accomplish 2 goals. It's going to arc out to the side a little bit away from the exhaust manifold so it doesn't get any hotter than it has to, and it also will not have any low spots that hang below the fitting where oil could pool up. This is gravity fed, so we need to be free flowing as possible, and I think we would have accomplished that here. With the oil return covered, now we need to feed oil to the turbo with this sandwich plate and pre-built line. It has 2 extra holes on it that I have plugged, and it uses this little adapter which goes onto the back of the block and into this oil filter. So we're going to put that in the back of the block like we would install the oil filter. Then we put the sandwich plate over that, and then that leaves the threaded bit hanging out where the oil filter will install, and basically just like it normally would onto the back of the block, except for spaced out by 1 inch. Here's the back of the block where the oil filter would go. I'm going to be installing that sort of extension with a socket wrench, and then I'm going to put over that the sandwich plate, but I won't be able to get very good video of that. But here, you can watch me install the other end going into the turbo with this NPT 2-4AN 90-degree fitting. It's always nice to install lines with a flared end wrench. Now, a little known fact, or maybe everybody knows this, but recently discovered by me fact, is that on the side of a B-series cylinder head, there are M6 holes, which means you can take this standard 10mm bolt and use it with these P-clamps to attach this oil line right here. Those are the two M6 holes. P-clamps are going to keep that oil line away from the timing belt. So this is now installed. That is not touching on that sharp corner, and there's a healthy gap between the line and the timing belt on both sides. And you can see the line going back to that sandwich plate is not touching anything, but I will put some zip ties to kind of keep it from going near that alternator, because that could be bad. All we need is to fill it up with fluids, and we can start it up to make sure it doesn't leak.
Okay, it's time to start it up. I've got this open because this was completely drained to allow it to let air out. This, I need to get a new one because it's too short now, but for the test it'll sit right there. Battery is hooked back up, and it's time to start it. And then I can put away all these tools. But really, I'm gonna see if anything leaks. I put some clean paper underneath. So, let's go. Fuel pump. Oil pressure, voltage, fuel pressure. Open exhaust.
From here, for several minutes, I'm inspecting all of the new connections I made and making sure that there's no oil leaking, and let it run for a little while till I was confident that we were in the clear. And now, on to the next steps. And that next step is putting the intercooler back on, putting the bumper back on, installing a longer line for the radiator overflow, and putting the headlight back on so I can drive this across town so we can get custom intercooler pipe welded up over at AE Race. We're now at AE Race headquarters, where Tony and Caleb are working on the intercooler piping and exhaust piping. I would love to be fabricating this myself in a future project, but I am not even remotely a competent TIG welder yet. So for now, you will get a montage of them building intercooler piping and exhaust piping. Now we're back home in my own garage. We're fitting up the intercooler piping. Since I actually ran the car, now the turbo is burned in blue and the intake exhaust manifold is burned in kind of a gold, so that's pretty cool. The intercooler piping comes off the intercooler and goes up through there and comes through here. I have this VS Racing blow-off valve that I will be installing here. The blow-off valve, which goes right here with a V-band, and this is a pretty hefty one, is of course to release pressure in the charge piping when I close the throttle, so that the turbo does not just build infinite boost on that side of the engine, just outside of the engine rather. I will be including a diagram for vacuum lines and oil lines. I'll have a link in the description. This vacuum line here is going to be going basically to the back of the intake manifold, but to tap into the regular vacuum system, but I'll include a detailed schematic if you're not clear on how that works. I have this banjo fitting, and I also have to do something similar on the wastegate, although that one will be connected to the turbo, not the back of the intake manifold. All right, now you see we have couplers, we have vacuum lines, everything is installed. We have a turbocharged car. The only thing left to do is to go back to AE Race and let Tony tune us for about 25 PSI, and then we're gonna go do a hot lap at autocross. When you're watching that, I'm not going to talk through it so you can hear the cool turbo noises, but do note that in the top right we have engine speed, manifold pressure, and throttle position sensor.
that's it. That's the project. That's the build. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, please like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you're working on. And stay tuned for the next project, which is going to involve these two Miata engines.